Hello everyone, and especially you, Jasmine. This is Jade here, and this is my submission for Mother Tongue Day. Now, I'm a Californian, and I've lived here for all but a few months of my life. But I was born in South Dakota in the Midwest, and that's where my family is from, South Dakota and Iowa, and that's where my great-grandparents came when they immigrated to this country. So I thought that for Mother Tongue Day, I would read from the work of Willa Cather. Willa Cather was the quintessential voice for the Midwest and for the Prairie. So here is a reading from the beginning of O Pioneers. O Pioneers, Part 1, The Wild Land. One January day 30 years ago, the little town of Hanover, anchored on a windy Nebraska tableland, was trying not to be blown away. A mist of fine snowflakes was curling and eddying about the cluster of low drab buildings huddled on the gray prairie under a gray sky. The dwelling houses were set about haphazard on the tough prairie sod. Some of them looked as if they had been moved in overnight, and others as if they were straying off by themselves, headed straight for the open plain. None of them had any appearance of permanence, and the howling wind blew under them as well as over them. The main street was a deeply rutted road, now frozen hard, which ran from the squat red railway station and the grain elevator at the north end of the town to the lumber yard and the horse pond at the south end. On either side of this road straggled two uneven rows of wooden buildings: the general merchandise stores, the two banks, the drugstore, the feed store, the saloon, the post office. The board sidewalks were gray with trampled snow, but at 2 o'clock in the afternoon, the shopkeepers, having come back from dinner, were keeping well behind their frosty windows. The children were all in school, and there was nobody abroad in the streets but a few rough-looking countrymen in coarse overcoats with their long caps pulled down to their noses. Some of them had brought their wives to town, and now and then a red or plaid shawl flashed out of one store into the shelter of another. At the hitch bars along the street, a few heavy work-horses harnessed to farm wagons shivered under their blankets. About the station, everything was quiet, for that there would not be another train in until night. On the sidewalk in front of one of the stores sat a little Swede boy crying bitterly. He was about 5 years old. His big black cloth coat was much too big for him, and made him look like a little old man. His shrunken brown flannel dress had been washed many times, and left a long stretch of stocking between the hem of his skirt and the tops of his clumsy copper-toed shoes. His cap was pulled down over his ears, his nose and his chubby cheeks were chapped and red with cold. He cried quietly, and the few people who hurried by did not notice him. He was afraid to stop anyone, afraid to go into the store and ask for help, so he sat wringing his long sleeves and looking up a telegraph pole beside him, whimpering, "My kitten, oh my kitten, her will freeze." At the top of the pole crouched a shivering gray kitten, mewling faintly and clinging desperately to the wood with her claws. The boy had been left at the store while his sister went to the doctor's office, and in her absence a dog had chased his kitten up the pole. The little creature had never been so high before, and she was too frightened to move. Her master was sunk in despair. He was a little country boy, and this village was to him a very strange and perplexing place, where people wore fine clothes and had hard hearts. He always felt shy and awkward here, and wanted to hide behind things for fear someone might laugh at him. Just now he was too unhappy to care who laughed. At last he seemed to see a ray of hope. His sister was coming, and he got up and ran toward her in his heavy shoes. His sister was a tall, strong girl, and she walked rapidly and resolutely, as if she knew exactly where she was going and what she was going to do next. She wore a man's long ulster, not as if it were an affliction, but as if it were very comfortable and belonged to her, carried it like a young soldier, and a round plush cap tied down with a thick veil. She had a serious, thoughtful face, and her clear, deep blue eyes were fixed intently on the distance without seeming to see anything, as if she were in trouble. She did not notice the little boy until he pulled her by the coat. Then she stopped short and stooped down to wipe his wet face. "Emil, I told you to stay in the store and not come out. What is the matter with you?" "My kitten, sister, my kitten. A man put her out and a dog chased her up there." his forefinger projecting from the sleeve of his coat, pointed up to the wretched little creature on the pole. "Oh, Emil, didn't I tell you she'd get us into trouble of some kind if you brought her? What made you tease me so? But there, I ought to have known better myself." She went to the foot of the pole and held out her arms, crying, "Kitty, kitty, kitty!" But the kitten only mewed and faintly waved its tail. Alexandra turned away decidedly. "No, she won't come down. Someone will have to go up after her. I saw the Lindstrom's wagon in town. I'll go see if I can find Carl. Maybe he can do something. Only you must stop crying, or I won't go a step. Where's your comforter? Did you leave it in the store? Never mind. Hold still while I put this on you." She unwound the brown veil from her head and tied it about his throat. A shabby little traveling man, who was just then coming out of the store on his way to the saloon, stopped and gazed stupidly at the shining mass of hair she bared when she took off her veil. 2 thick braids pinned about her head in the German way, with a fringe of reddish-yellow curls blowing out from under her cap. He took his cigar out of his mouth and held the wet end between the fingers of his woolen glove. "My God, girl, what a head of hair!" he exclaimed, quite innocently and foolishly. She stabbed him with a glance of Amazonian fierceness and drew in her lower lip. Most unnecessary severity. It gave the little clothing drummer such a start that he actually let his cigar fall to the sidewalk and went off weakly in the teeth of the wind to the saloon. His hand was still unsteady when he took his glass from the bartender. His feeble flirtatious instincts had been crushed before, but never so mercilessly. He felt cheap and ill-used, as if someone had taken advantage of him. When a drummer had been knocking about in drab little towns and crawling across the windy country in dirty smoking cars, was he to be blamed if he chanced upon a fine human creature he suddenly wished himself more of a man? While the little drummer was drinking to recover his nerve, Alexandra hurried to the drugstore as the most likely place to find Carl Lindstrom. There he was turning over a portfolio of chromo studies, which the druggist stole to the Hanover women who did china painting. Alexandra explained her predicament, and the boy followed her to the corner where Emil sat still by the pole. "I'll have to go up after her, Alexandra. I think at the depot they have some spikes I can strap on my feet. Wait a minute." Carl thrust his hands into his pockets, lowered his head, and darted up the street against the north wind. He was a tall boy of 15, slight and narrow-chested. When he came back with the spikes, Alexandra asked him what he had done with his overcoat. "I left it in the drugstore. I couldn't climb in it anyhow. Catch me if I fall, Emil," he called back as he began his ascent. Alexandra watched him anxiously. The cold was bitter enough on the ground. The kitten would not budge an inch. Carl had to go to the very top of the pole, and then had some difficulty in tearing her from her hold. When he reached the ground, he handed the cat to her tearful little master. "Now go into the store with her, Emil, and get warm." He opened the door for the child. "Wait a minute, Alexandra. Why can't I drive you as far as our place? It's getting colder every minute. Have you seen the doctor?" "Yes. He is coming over tomorrow, but he says father can't get better, can't get well." The girl's lip trembled. She looked fixedly up the bleak street as if she were gathering her strength to face something, as if she were trying with all her might to grasp a situation which, no matter how painful, must be met and dealt with somehow. The wind flapped the skirts of her heavy coat about her. End for now.